It was just another day at the roadside cafe, the kind of place people barely noticed while passing by. Emma, a young waitress in her early 20s, tied on her apron like she always did. Her eyes held the weight of unpaid bills, long nights, and the constant pressure of surviving one more day. Her shoes were worn out, her back arched, and her rent was already 2 weeks overdue. But you'd never guess it from the way she smiled. To every customer, Emma brought the same warmth, whether they tipped or not, whether they were kind or cold. She had mastered the art of hiding her storms behind a gentle voice and a kind heart. For Emma, kindness wasn't a job requirement. It was who she was. Just after the lunch rush had faded, a teenage boy walked into the cafe, nervous, wet from the drizzle outside, and clearly out of place. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and sat quietly, barely looking up. When it was time to pay, he dug into his pockets and pulled out a handful of coins, quarters, dimes, even a few foreign coins. But it wasn't enough. The cashier looked at him, unsure. Emma saw the hesitation, stepped forward, and gently took the tray. "It's fine," she said softly, ringing it through without charging him. As he turned to leave, she slipped a warm cookie into his takeaway bag. "On the house," she whispered with a wink. The boy blinked, stunned for a moment, then smiled, a real, full smile, the kind you remember for a long time. In the far corner of the cafe, near the window fogged slightly from the drizzle outside, sat a man who didn't quite fit in. He wore rugged jeans, a weathered jacket, and a plain baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His order was simple, just a black coffee, but it had gone cold from how long he'd been sitting there. He barely touched it. He didn't talk much, didn't scroll through his phone like most others. Instead, his eyes followed Emma quietly, watching her move from table to table with that same gentle smile, that same energy she poured into every stranger. He watched as she helped an elderly woman with her chair, laughed with a tired delivery man, and swept crumbs off a toddler's high chair without being asked. Emma didn't notice him, but he noticed everything. As the cafe's door chimed softly behind him, the man stepped out into the cool, damp evening. The drizzle had stopped, but the streets still glistened under the fading light. He walked calmly toward the curb where a sleek black SUV waited, polished, quiet, and clearly out of place in this neighborhood. Without a word, he slid into the back seat, shut the door, and took a long breath. Then, pulling out his phone, he made a single call. "Her name," he said, voice low but firm. "The waitress. I want every detail, where she lives, who she is, everything." The line went silent for a moment, then a soft reply. "Understood, Mr. West." As the SUV pulled away into traffic, the man leaned back, his expression unreadable. But one thing was certain. Emma's life had just caught the attention of someone who never watched without reason. The cafe was quiet now. The chairs were stacked, the lights dimmed, and the last of the coffee pots had been washed and dried. Emma moved slowly across the floor, broom in hand, sweeping up crumbs no one would ever thank her for. Her shoulders drooped with exhaustion, but it wasn't just from the long shift, it was from everything. The overdue bills, the uncertainty of tomorrow, the loneliness she never spoke about. As she reached the end of the dining area, she paused, turned back to the corner security camera, and wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her uniform. She thought she was alone, but hundreds of miles away, in a luxury penthouse office filled with silence and screens, the cafe's live CCTV footage played in front of a man who hadn't looked away since she served that teenage boy. He watched quietly, not out of pity, but with growing fascination. He had seen wealth, power, even fame, but not kindness like this. Not in a very long time. The next morning felt like any other. Emma clocked in, tied her apron, and began prepping tables before the breakfast crowd arrived. But as she reached into her apron pocket for a pen, her fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. Folded paper. Curious, she opened it slowly. It wasn't typed, nor was it some corporate message. It was handwritten in a clean, elegant script. I saw what you did. The world needs more hearts like yours. That was it. No name, no number. Just that one sentence. Emma stood frozen for a moment, the note trembling in her hands. Her eyes darted around the empty cafe. Was this a prank? Or something else entirely? She smiled softly, heart beating a little faster, and slipped the note into her back pocket, like it was a secret only she was meant to find. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the clouds and the cafe filled with the buzz of mid-shift chatter, a delivery man walked in holding a small brown box. "For Emma," he said, scanning the receipt. Confused, she stepped forward and signed for it. She wasn't expecting anything. No birthday, no online orders, nothing. Curious eyes followed her as she opened it behind the counter. Inside, nestled in fresh white tissue paper, was a brand new pair of durable, professional work shoes. Not flashy, just strong, comfortable, clean. Her eyes widened. The same model she had been saving up for, because the soles of her old pair had thinned to the point where rainwater soaked through. There was no name, no receipt, no sender. Just a small card that read, "Keep walking forward." Emma held the card in her hand for a long moment, heart quietly pounding. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, and somehow they truly saw her. Just past 6 p.m., the cafe bell chimed again, soft, unassuming. Emma looked up and immediately recognized him. The quiet man from the corner. The same rugged jacket, the same calm eyes under that plain cap. This time, he didn't head straight to a booth. Instead, he walked directly up to the counter. There was a moment of silence, and then his voice, deep, steady, broke the air. "Have dinner with me after your shift." No strings attached. Just a conversation. Emma blinked, caught off guard. Her first instinct was to decline. She didn't know this man. But there was something about the way he asked. No arrogance, no pressure. Just calm sincerity. She studied his face for a beat longer, then gave a small nod. "All right," she said quietly. "Just dinner." As he walked back to his usual seat, Emma's heart fluttered, not with romance, but with curiosity. Who was he? Later that evening, Emma sat across from him at a quiet diner just a few blocks from where she worked. The world outside was buzzing, but inside, the atmosphere was calm, almost gentle. For the first few minutes, they simply talked, nothing deep, just easy, harmless conversation. Then, slowly, he began to open up. He told her about his childhood, how he grew up in a forgotten town with a single mother who worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. He talked about hunger, about hand-me-down shoes, and sleeping with the TV on just to feel less alone. Not once did he mention where he lived now or what he owned. He didn't talk about business, success, or titles. Instead, he asked her questions, what her dreams were, what she'd do if money wasn't a problem. Emma hesitated at first, but eventually, her walls came down. She spoke about wanting to open a cafe that felt like home for the forgotten. And, as she spoke, he listened, not like a stranger, but like someone who truly cared. It wasn't a date. It was something deeper. The next morning came, and the cafe opened like usual. The regulars trickled in, the kitchen buzzed with orders, but something was off. Emma wasn't there. Her apron still hung untouched in the back room, and her section of the floor remained empty. At first, her coworkers thought she might be running late, but minutes turned into hours, and concern began to spread. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, and no one could reach her. By mid-afternoon, whispers turned into worry. Then the truth surfaced. Her landlord had evicted her the night before, packed her few belongings in trash bags, left them by the curb, and changed the locks. She had no family nearby, no backup plan. Emma had vanished. And the quiet man who had sat in his usual booth that morning, sipping his coffee in silence, now stared at the empty corner of the cafe, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. Something in him shifted. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up quietly outside a women's shelter tucked between forgotten buildings on the edge of town. Inside, Emma sat on a worn-out bench, hugging her coat tightly around her. Her eyes were tired, her spirit even more so. She was trying to stay invisible, just one more name on a list. But then the door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped in. The same man from the cafe. The one who had watched, listened, and disappeared. Emma froze, disbelief washing over her. How did you find me?" she asked, standing slowly. He didn't explain. Instead, he handed her a warm cup of coffee, the same kind she used to serve him. "You help people without knowing their stories," he said gently. "Now let me help you." At that moment, no money was mentioned, no titles dropped. Just two people, face to face, one offering kindness, and the other finally receiving it. The next morning, Emma found herself in the passenger seat of his SUV, still unsure why she had agreed to come. They drove in silence, weaving through unfamiliar streets until the car finally stopped in front of a small, sunlit storefront with dusty windows and a faded "For Lease" sign. Confused, she followed him inside. The space was empty but beautiful. High ceilings, warm light, a worn counter that looked like it had stories to tell. "This," he said, turning to face her, "is yours." Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" He smiled gently. "No rent. No conditions. Just start your dream." Her heart skipped. She laughed nervously, certain he was joking. But then he pulled out a thin folder, opened it, and handed her a crisp piece of paper, a property deed with her name on it. Emma stood frozen, staring at it, tears building in her eyes. This wasn't a dream. It was the beginning of everything she thought she'd lost. Weeks later, the old cafe space was reborn. Clean, bright, and full of warmth, it opened with a new name painted above the door in soft gold letters: Heart and Spoon Cafe. The concept was simple: come as you are. Whether you had money or not, you'd get a meal, a smile, and a seat at the table. Emma stood behind the counter on opening day, her hands trembling, but not from fear, from fulfillment. And just as the clock hit noon, the door creaked open, and in walked someone who stopped her in her tracks. The same teenage boy from the cafe, the one who couldn't afford his meal. He looked different now. Clean shirt, brighter eyes, holding a folded piece of paper. "I heard you were hiring," he said with a hopeful grin. Emma smiled, eyes misty. "You're already family," she replied. And just like that, her first customer became her first employee, a quiet reminder that when kindness is planted, it always finds a way to bloom. Outside Heart and Spoon Cafe, a small crowd had gathered, some curious, some hungry, some just drawn in by the warm smell of fresh bread and the sound of quiet laughter. Inside, Emma moved through the space like it had always been hers, pouring coffee, wiping down tables, and greeting strangers like old friends. But across the street, tucked behind tinted windows of a sleek black SUV, the man who made it all possible sat silently, watching. No press, no photos, no announcement, just a quiet smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He didn't want to be seen, didn't care to be thanked. He simply wanted to witness it, to know that in a world rushing toward power and profit, one small act of kindness still had the power to grow into something beautiful. And as he slowly pulled away from the curb, Emma never even knew he had been there. But he knew the world just got a little brighter.